Most science experiments can either be grouped as observational studies or controlled studies. What's the difference? Observational studies is where the scientist only observes, only collects data. They cannot manipulate anything. They are just an outside observer collecting data. So observational studies can happen both in a lab and in the field. For example, if you are trying to study the behavior of a volcano, that's an observational study in the field. Now, if you have rats in a lab that you are subjecting to different conditions and trying to see the effect of these conditions on some aspects, the health of these rats, for example, or mice, then that's a laboratory study, since you have those animals in a laboratory setting. Now, observational studies are needed in cases when we cannot conduct a controlled experiments, either because of safety reasons, like what I mentioned, studying a volcano, or ethical reasons. For example, you might be do harm to the rats if you are studying them. Or if you are doing some medical studies on humans. So it can be safety reasons, volcanoes or experiments involving nuclear matters, etc. Ethical reasons, like you can harm your subject, or logical reasons. You cannot do it. Like if you are looking at the stars, studying the stars, the galaxies, the nebulas, that's an observational study. You cannot manipulate anything there. Now, controlled experiments are experiments where the scientist can manipulate the factors that can affect the data. Here, the scientist can actually look at the experiment, try to study a particular outcome, and try to investigate everything that can affect that outcome, and can control how to investigate what's affecting that outcome. Now, in this case, the factors that can be collected, that can be measured or controlled, are called variables. And we'll talk about those later in another video. Scientific experiments can also be either laboratory or field studies. Laboratory studies are studies that can be done within the confines of a building. They can be done in a lab within the confines of a building. Laboratory studies can be both controlled studies or observational studies. For example, if you have mice that you're observing in a lab, that's an observational study, that's a laboratory study. However, the confines of a building give us the advantage of more easily controlling the experiments, controlling the studies, where we can control the environment, we can control the temperature, we can control everything that can possibly affect the experiment. Field studies have to be done outside, in the field. They cannot be done in a lab. Field studies can sometimes be controlled studies, like in the case of agricultural type studies, studying the effect of one factor on the growth of one type of plants, for example. However, in some cases, the experiment can be easily affected by freak weather phenomena. You control everything, you are working carefully for months to check the effect of the variables on the growth of plants, and then a freak weather phenomenon comes about and messes up the whole experiment. So field studies can be controlled, but it's more difficult to have controlled field studies. In most cases, though, field studies are observational studies, like when we observe the stars, or planets, or galaxies, or nebulas, or volcanoes. These are field studies. Or observe animals out in the field. That's also a field study.